So we were discussing Sri Krishna's visit to Sadharan Brahmo Samaj, and he is giving some instructions to Vijay Krishna Goswami. So Vijay Krishna Goswami, as you all know, was still a member of the Sadharan Brahmo Samaj, and he was a paid preacher. Brahmo Samaj had that tradition where they used to employ paid preachers, like we have secular priests who could be having a family and who used to visit, who regularly visited Brahmo Samaj, and preaching was his profession. So there were paid people, there were voluntary people who did voluntary service in the Brahmo Samaj. So that was the arrangement. But M is mentioning in this particular chapter that he did not agree with the rules and regulations of the present Brahmo Samaj. So he also associates, Brahmo Samaj prohibited its followers from following a god with form. They did not promote idol worship. In fact, they banned it. They said you can't be worshipping idols. So that was not agreeable because Vijay Krishna Goswami, he was still a bhakta in the deep within his heart, he believed in the God with form. So he used to associate with people like Sri Ramakrishna and others who believed in God with form. And this the Brahmo Samaj members did not like. They said, we openly say that God with form is not acceptable. For God is formless, though he has some qualities. So they had absorbed a lot of ideas from other religions, and they felt that by believing in God with form and going to temples and doing formal worship, you really do not promote spirituality. It promotes some kind of dogmatism. So they had their own ideas. So the Sadharan Brahmo Samaj, of which Vijay Krishna Goswami was a paid member, did not agree with the rules and regulations, and he mixed freely with other people. He was more liberal. That is why Sri Ramakrishna loved him. Sri Ramakrishna did not like one-sidedness in any nature. Any person who is one-sided and who believed that this alone is true, everything else is untrue, that was not Sri Ramakrishna's attitude. He was one of the most liberal people, spiritual leaders of the world. In the whole history of the spiritual giants or personalities or prophets, you will not find a more liberal or a universal person than Sri Ramakrishna. So naturally, lot of people, no doubt they belong to various sects. There are various sects within Hinduism and outside of Hinduism. If they had a little bit of that liberal attitude, like Vijay Krishna Goswami, they would obviously be attracted to Sri Ramakrishna's message. Said, here is a person, here is a prophet, or here is a avatara who does not, who accepts everybody and anybody, whatever stage of life he is in. He does not see the merits and demerits of a person. As long as one is sincere and has faith in one's own belief, is acceptable to Sri Ramakrishna. So naturally, even Keshav Chandra Sen, also Keshav Sen used to visit Sri Ramakrishna. Though he strictly, people used to misunderstand and they used to find it surprising that how could Keshav, one of the founding members of, one of the leaders of Brahmo Samaj, could visit Sri Ramakrishna, because deep within his heart he was sincere and he knew somehow, though they did not believe in a God with form, they somehow knew that Sri Ramakrishna was such a universal personality. He accepted the Brahmos, he accepted the Vaishnavas, he accepted the Shaktas, he accepted the Christians, he accepted everybody. So there were some people who were not fanatic, they were not sectarian, though they belonged to these different sects, that is Brahmo Samaj, Arya Samaj. They were all reform movements within Hinduism, but still, those among them who were liberal and who had a liberal spirit towards religion and spirituality, they found a genuine person genuine person who could really talk of spirituality irrespective of the faiths and beliefs and the dogmas associated with their particular sect. So many of the Brahmos devotees obviously were displeased with Vijay Krishna Goswami. They said, you don't follow the tenets, you are a preacher and you associate with people who believe in God with form. Sri Ramakrishna was one of them. So Sri Ramakrishna then very jokingly, in a very light mood, he tells Vijay Krishna Goswami. Sri Ramakrishna, there is a conversation or instruction, some wonderful instructions he gives Vijay Krishna Goswami. He knew he is a genuine person, and because he is a paid member of Brahmo Samaj, he has to do his duties. He has to preach preach the ideology that Brahmo Samaj follows or propounds. So he cannot change, but he was free enough, he was open enough to associate with other people. Though he had to preach, being a preacher of the Samaj, he had to preach exactly what the tenets which they believed. So Sri Ramakrishna understood this difficulty. So he told Vijay, don't worry, they condemn you because you meet people who believe in God with form. So Sri Ramakrishna knew what is the reason why they are dissatisfied, why they criticize Vijay Krishna Goswami. The devotees of God must have a firm and steadfast understanding. That is, and he's comparing it to the blacksmith's anvil. Blacksmith's anvil is a wonderful example Sri Ramakrishna is to give, because there was quite a few blacksmiths in Kamarpukur. They were everywhere. And most of the hammer, the blacksmith would use a hammer to form the molten or heated metals and convert it into different shapes. So the blacksmith's anvil was a very strong base on which the different hot metals were molded, where continuous hammer blows would fall on this anvil. So he gives that example that though the anvil of a blacksmith, you should be firm like the anvil of a blacksmith. Why? Because it receives hammer blows unceasingly, but it remains unchanged. So you may be assailed or you may be criticized. There will be a lot of people who may not agree with you. The unfriendly people may find fault with you. They may speak ill of you. But if you sincerely love Bhagwan, you will bear all this. So now he is giving a wonderful lesson on titiksha. Titiksha is one of the qualities which Shankaracharya in his Vivek Chodamani encourages. He says without this quality of titiksha, one cannot even hope to become an Advaitin. Advaita is very easy to understand, to accept rationally. But practical Advaita requires of a sadhaka immense titiksha. Immense titiksha means immense the capacity to remain unmoved under circumstances which are trying to press you down. In fact, Swami Vivekananda defined life as a unfoldment of a being, unfoldment of the spirituality of a being under circumstances trying to press it down. Circumstances will never be friendly, especially when you follow the spiritual path. When we follow the spiritual, anybody follows the spiritual path, especially in the case of an Advaitin, where he has to constantly assert the fact that this world with all its pains and pleasures, with all its dualities, is not true. If it is true, then we'll have to bother about it. But if it is untrue, then we have to accept things as they come. If we have strong likes and dislikes, one can never even hope to follow Advaita. Advaita philosophy may be very pleasant, very nice for rationalists to accept, because you don't believe in God with form. You don't have to believe. In fact, you don't have to believe in a God at all. Buddha also encouraged that kind of attitude. Why should you fight about the existence of God whom you have not seen? Take it for granted that there is no God who is ruling this universe. We don't really need it. That's what Advaitins say. But then you have to believe in something which is very difficult. You have to believe that the whole universe is pervaded by this idea of God, Brahman, as the Brahmos also tried to believe. They took some ideas of the Upanishads, from the Upanishads, and they said God is formless. Okay, fine, God is formless, but then why do you uh, complain when your form is disturbed? That ego within every human being or jiva feels the blows of the world. Sometimes they are pleasant, sometimes they are troublesome. But then you should not complain, because it's the same Lord who is all pervading. So Sri Ramakrishna here he says, even a person who believes in God with form, devotees of God, they are not exempted from this. The titiksha that they have to show should be like the blacksmith's anvil. The blacksmith's anvil, no matter how many blows of the hammer that blacksmith gives, the anvil doesn't complain. It bears everything. So in Advaita Vedanta, Vivek Chudamani, Shankaracharya says, Sahanam sarva dukkhanam apratikara purvakam chinta vilapa rahitam sa titiksha nigadyate. What is the titiksha you have to develop as the preliminary step, even before you start practice of Advaita? In the Vivek Chudamani, Shankaracharya says, even to qualify to practice Advaita, you should have titiksha. And what is the definition of titiksha he gives? That is exactly what Sri Ramakrishna is telling Vijay Krishna Goswami. Though he is not an Advaitin, but he says even for Advaitin, even for a person who believes in a personal God, an avatar or a personal God, a deity, or whom he is incessantly praise, even he has to have this titiksha. There cannot be any spiritual life. In fact, a person does not qualify to practice spirituality if he doesn't have titiksha. So, sahanam sarva dukkhanam means you have to bear like the blacksmith's anvil, which receives continuous hammer blows, but it remains unchanged. It remains unfazed. It remains undisturbed. So that is the state we have to attain. It's difficult. Titiksha is the most difficult thing in the world. But without that, we don't even qualify for being called spiritual people or Advaitins. So, how does a person do chinta vilaparahitam? It's not just that he has to painfully. There are people who helplessly tolerate all the trouble that is given to them. That is not what is expected from a person who has titiksha. He has to not only tolerate, but he chinta and vilapa. These are two important words Shankaracharya is using. He should not even worry about it. If he bears all these troubles, but always complains to others that this is the trouble, that is the trouble, that is the trouble, then it is not titiksha. You should neither think about it, just encounter it. Just like the blacksmith's anvil, it doesn't complain when there are blows from the hammer. It bears the blow and then forgets about it till the next blow comes. So it remains unchanged. That is how, without chinta, without vilapa, without a feeling of revenge, just bear it, accept things as they come to you without even, that is the sadhana which one expects to do. So here Sri Ramakrishna is saying, unfriendly people may find fault with you and speak ill of you. But if you sincerely love Bhagwan, if your goal is fixed, that I love at any cost, no matter how many hammer blows fall on the anvil, I am not going to change. My attitude towards my Ishta, the Bhagwan whom I love, the Lord whom I love, for whom I have renounced in the sense, I renounced my ego, not just formal renunciation. Because if I have strong likes and dislikes, if I want things should happen this way, then I don't trust God. If I trust God, I should have a feeling, I should have a firm conviction. That is what Sri Ramakrishna means by sincere love. that I'll bear all these things because these are temporary things. They will come and go. Just as the blacksmith's anvil, no matter how many blows are there, it knows that I'm not going to change. I'm just going on to hold on to the Lord. Then he says, he gives some practical hints. First he says, but if you sincerely love Bhagwan, you will be able to bear all this. So the love of God becomes so primary that if you love God, these small uh, uh, troubles will not bother you. But at the same time, he gives some very practical advice, very pragmatic. Sri Ramakrishna does not expect you to just bear everything that is thrown at you. That is not what he said. He says it is not possible to meditate on the Lord while living with the wicked. So he gives another advice. Deliberately you don't live with the wicked so that they cause trouble again and again. It's like, there are certain things. You know that in the forest there are wild animals. And you go to show your bravery and say, nothing will happen to me, I'll go to the forest. Animals are not going to oblige. It's their nature to kill, and they will kill at the first available opportunity. So he says, if you really want to meditate, then don't associate. It's difficult to live with the wicked and still lead a meditative life. He says, remember the rishis who used to meditate on the Lord in forests with tigers, bears, and other wild animals around them. He's giving an example now. How did they live? He says, unfriendly people have the nature of tigers and bears. They chase offensively and they can harm you. So now Sri Ramakrishna is giving some very, very practical hints as to how to deal with people. He's not saying that there will be unfriendly people. There will be people who will try to discourage you from following the spiritual path. That is what he means when he says wicked people. He doesn't mean people who just rob your wealth. They are definitely wicked. They rob others. They cheat others. They are wicked. But here, when Sri Ramakrishna says wicked people, he means people who convince you or who try to convince you that spirituality is not something worth pursuing. Then he says, but there are other wicked people also who can cause obstacles. They may not deter you from reaching the goal or pursuing your goal of spirituality, but they can cause lot of obstructions and that will delay. You can't peacefully sit and do sadhana. So, or upasana. Because for that you need, that's why Sri Ramakrishna used to say, now and then go to solitude, have some nirjan vas. So you must be careful of many types. He says, now Sri Ramakrishna is giving him Vijay Krishna Goswami. He said, there are few types of people whom you have to avoid. So he says, the first person you should avoid is a wealthy man. First and important, a wealthy man. Rich people, he's not saying all wealthy men are bad, but rich people can harm you if they wish. Because they got the power of money. They got an ego that we are rich. We can get away with everything. That gives them a sort of pride or arrogance. That's very common because that is how Sri Ramakrishna used to give that example. A frog once got a coin and he found a coin and he took that coin to its hole, a small hole where it was living. Every day the elephant used to come and this frog was afraid of this elephant and used to go inside the hole. But Sri Ramakrishna mentions once humorously that one day this frog got a coin and a gold coin. He took that gold coin and preserved it in his small hole. And the elephant came again, but this time he was full of arrogance. Though it was just a coin, it is nothing for an elephant. He can simply crush this frog if it wants. But this frog started croaking and started threatening. Of course, the elephant would not even have bothered. But Sri Ramakrishna says, see the arrogance of this. He has got one coin and he thinks he's powerful. See the ego. So rich people, Sri Ramakrishna says, can harm you if they wish. Unless they are very noble, there can be rich people who are noble, but you have to be careful. You have to not just associate with them, because they can harm you if their interests suffer, if their ego is hurt. So you have to talk to them very cautiously. You might even have to agree something they say. See, this is Sri Ramakrishna is not uh, uh, asking Vijay Krishna Goswami to follow untruth, but you might have to nod your head and say, just to protect yourself. Tulsidas in his famous Ramcharitmanas, he says, Haji Haji karte rahiye, baithiye apna tham. Means agree and say yes. What do you lose by just saying, oh yes, yes, I agree with you? You don't have to really agree with him. And you do what you feel is right. So there will be a lot of people in the world, especially the rich people, who will give you a hint or two what should be the ideal of your life. And Sri Ramakrishna says, be cautious. You may even have to agree, because if you disagree, the power of his wealth and the power of his ego and the pride and the strength he has got by virtue of being rich, he may turn it on you, and he'll disturb you without any reason, and that will disturb your mind. You can't meditate. Why should you do that? Then he gives another example. This is a little more crude. He says, then there is a dog which you may chase away, but it continues to follow you and bark. I mean, some people have that nature. It's the nature to bark. So they'll come, no matter how much you chase it away, maybe temporarily they'll run away, but they'll again come and follow you and bark. So Sri Ramakrishna says, in this case, you have to pacify them with gentle sound, pacify that dog. If you can't expect a dog, he will react, the dog will react, it will react. But the people who know how to handle dogs, they will perhaps use a technique where they can pacify that dog. And then he says that there are some people who are like bulls. Then there is a bull which would attack you with horns. So you have to pacify it also with gentle words. You have to behave, do not irritate such people. So here Sri Ramakrishna is being very pragmatic. On one side he says, you just don't ignore, just ignore it. But ignorance doesn't mean you don't be careful. You have to understand and handle these people carefully. If you want peace of mind, if you want to progress in spiritual life. Then there he says, there is a lunatic. When you rouse his anger, some people who are most unreasonable, they just cannot be convinced. So they will abuse you, whether you are right or wrong, they will abuse you, right and left. Even your 14 ancestors. He says they are so crazy that when they are angry, they can abuse all your 14 ancestors. You can't reason with them. Then Sri Ramakrishna very humorously says, you have to perhaps say to them, how do you do, uncle? Perhaps that will please him. So there is a way of even handling these people. And he says he may even sit and smoke with you. Because these people, you can't just oppose them or you can't just fight with them. Then all your energy will be wasted. And then he says, he's giving his own example. When I see a wicked person, Sri Ramakrishna was a wonderful judge of human beings. He had a maid servant who is to clean the Dakshineshwar temple. She was employed by the temple. Well, she was very short-tempered. And Sri Ramakrishna knew that whatever she might be short-tempered, but she was serving, she was cleaning the rooms and all those things. So why should we unnecessarily irritate her? Her name was Brinde. She used to come, but she was very difficult to be pleased, and she used to get angry at the slightest pretext. So Sri Ramakrishna was always on his guard. He says, when I see a wicked person, I am on my guard. If one of them comes and asks if I have a hubble bubble for him to say, yes, I say, yes, I have. I don't turn him away. So also this Brinde every day used to He used to get a lot of prasad from the Dakshineshwar temple at a fixed time, and he used to distribute it to everybody. But he was very careful to keep a little prasad for this lady, because not only was she serving, but she was of a very short temper, and if her prasad was not there, she would get angry. So one day, it so happened that somebody gave away all the prasad to the assembled devotees. Sri Ramakrishna saw there is no prasad and it's time that this lady will come. She will expect some prasad. So he sends one of the disciples, go to the Dakshineshwar temple, get some prasad, otherwise she will create a big scene here. So you see, Sri Ramakrishna he was very sincere, but he is giving a lot of practical hints to people how to deal with difficult people, how to deal with wicked people, how to deal, because they will not allow you to practice spirituality, do your sadhana, upasana. Then he says there are some other people who have the nature of a serpent. You don't know when they will strike. You will have to decide a strategy to face their attack. If you don't consider carefully what to do and you become angry, you may feel like harming him in return to a greater extent. It's like action and reaction. The snake is a very peaceful creature, but if it feels that it is attacked, it will bite you. So you have to know how to handle the snake. So if you give a hint or if you try to defy somebody who has the nature of a snake, it's very likely that he'll hurt you. And you do not even know when it will strike. Snakes are always like that. They are very uh, secretive and they just bite you when you least expect. So it is essential that you associate with the holy from time to time. And Sri Ramakrishna says one of the solutions is try to avoid these wicked. You can't totally avoid, because in the workplace, in the profession, everywhere you will encounter, even in a casual walking down the street, you might encounter them. And Sri Ramakrishna knew that. He was very well protected. He was always living in the vicinity of the temple. But you see how many people came there, how many crazy people. Some of them lived with him. People like Hajara, who were very cunning and who used to misguide people like Narendra and others. They also lived there. So Sri Ramakrishna did not drive them away. He knew how to handle them. It's a wonderful, uh, you may say, he had a wonderful art of understanding people and behaving with them. That is why Sri Ramakrishna says he was a great teacher. He could go to the level of the disciple and raise him uh, to become a better person. And he is giving good hints. He knows Vijay Krishna Goswami will face a lot of criticism from his own people, from the members of the Brahmo Samaj for trying to do something good. It's not that people chase you or people harm you when you are doing something bad to them. But even if you do good, sometimes people out of jealousy, out of envy, they can harm you. So we have to be careful whose company we keep. So it's essential that you associate with the holy people from time to time, satsanga. It is only by keeping the company of holy men that you can discriminate between real and unreal. Otherwise, wicked people, we can hardly learn any lessons. Wicked people or people who are evil minded, they will convince you that the unreal is real, because for them that is very much real. And following their example, there is a chance that we also follow their wicked ways. So Sri Ramakrishna tells Vijay Krishna Goswami, you do this, you can discriminate between real and unreal, between what is temporary, what is permanent, and then hold on to the permanent, the Lord, so that you can practice spirituality or practice titiksha and develop yourself. But Vijay Krishna Goswami tells him, yes, sir, but I have no time. I'm so busy with work. That is a common complaint. Everybody says they have no time. They have time for everything. They have time for leisure. They have time for their profession. Of course, you have to be busy with your work, but they have time for many things. But they don't have time for practicing this titiksha. And Vijay Krishna Goswami, he has taken up this job of preaching as a job. He's a paid preacher. You should know that. So he is required by the Brahmo Samaj to work for certain hours. So he can't just go, leave everything and come to Thakur. He says, I remain so busy with my work. How can I do all what you are saying here? How to keep the company of holy men? So Sri Ramakrishna answers. He says, you are a religious teacher. You're not just an ordinary employee. You're not a slave to anybody. While others may have leisure, the preacher doesn't have. Others may have. He says the nature of your job is, because it's such an important job that you are doing, others will have leisure. People will they do their limited job and then just go and enjoy holy company if they like. But you are a preacher, definitely preacher will not have, because they expect the preachers to be full time. Though they may be paid, the society or the Samaj, Brahmo Samaj expected him to go wherever there is a demand. They would be asked to go and preach there, preach the tenets of Brahmo Samaj. So you don't have rest. You will have to go. When there is a demand, you have to go. You can't say no. So Sri Ramakrishna gives another example. When the administrator of an estate brings order in one part of it, I mean, you see how nicely Sri Ramakrishna has observed human nature. He had that knack of understanding how things are moving in the world, how ridiculous things can be, and how people fail to get some kind of leisure or some kind of time to even do their basic spiritual practices. He says, if the administrator of an estate succeeds in bringing order, he gets a good name. And then the landlord will say, oh, you did a nice job here. Now you go there and bring order to that part. I own that land, but there are some people who are not cooperative. Just go and. So this administrator is always busy. Likewise, he says, you also never get leisure. And all laugh. Sri Ramakrishna gave a very crude example, but that was the fact. Because Brahmo Samaj needed preachers, and whenever there is trouble, because people never approach religion when they are happy. You don't need God, you don't need any kind of religious advice or spiritual advice when things are going fine. I mean, when one is happy. It's only when there is trouble and when you see that you cannot solve your own problems and human beings cannot help you, then you go to God or then you go to spirituality and think that there will be a divine intervention and some of the problem will get solved. So they are very busy. He says, when there is trouble, people will come to you. I know your job is very difficult. You will never get leisure because happy people, good people will rarely come to you. It's very natural that when people are in trouble, then they remember God. So that is why Kunti once prayed to Krishna. Somebody asked Kunti, why don't you pray to Krishna to remove your troubles? For so many years, you are just tolerating everything. Your sons were driven out, their empire was taken away, your husband died, and you are facing so much of trouble. And you say that Krishna is your Ishta or he is your savior, and he doesn't solve your problems, then what's the use? Then she says, no, I pray to Krishna. And she in fact told Krishna that it is because I have troubles, because there are troubles, because things are, I don't get fooled by the world. These troubles bring me to you, and my love and devotion to the Lord increases. So you'd rather give me all these troubles so that I remember you. So that's a great psychological truth that doesn't mean we have to seek trouble. But the fact is that we remember God when there is trouble. So there is a beautiful Hindi saying which says, "Dukh mein samirana sabhi kare." Means everybody remembers the God when they are in trouble, when there is some problem. Sukh mein kare na koi. When they are happy, when they are enjoying pleasure, they don't even bother about God. Jo sukh mein samira na kare, but one who is wise enough, he doesn't wait for troubles to come to him to call on the Lord. He calls on him when he is happy. And that person will never feel uh, sad any time, because he is always, whether he is happy or whether he is unhappy, he is calling on the Lord. So Vijay says, I don't get this leisure. I'm always busy, but you please bless me. He is asking Sri Ramakrishna to bless him, that he gets holy company. So Sri Ramakrishna says, these are the words of an ignorant person. Now you are again asking help from somebody. It's the Lord alone who blesses. Who am I to bless you? So here Sri Ramakrishna is teaching a lesson in humility. He said, when you go as a preacher, always try to say it's the Lord who saves. You never say, I will save you, or I will do this, I will do that. These are the words of an ignorant person. So he is giving instructions to Brahmo householders. And now he is comparing family life and sannyasa, a life of celibacy. So Vijay now, of course, he is a paid preacher, he is a householder, he is asking, kindly give us instructions. Sri Ramakrishna, glancing around the Samaj hall with a smile, he is glancing around, just wants to see how many people who are here are householders. I think a majority of them were. So he knew that here I cannot give advice which would suit only the sannyasins or people who have renounced. But still, I have to tell them something. Tell them something which will ultimately uh, convince them that renunciation is the only path. But anyway, he glanced, and in a very good way, this is a good way, he said. Both spiritual and worldly pursuit here. He was just smiling and joking. He was not expecting them to take seriously. But he said, you see, all of you, it's good in a way. In a way, you people are very happy because you can have both spiritual and worldly pursuits. There is the reality and also absorption in worldly pursuits here. So all laugh. They know Sri Ramakrishna is taunting them. By scoring too many points, he gives an example. I have been burnt out of the game. I mean, there is a game when you score certain points, you are out of the game. Means that is, you become free. You get mukti. You get moksha. But you people are very clever. You have given up moksha because you don't want to leave the game. I mean, he is joking. He said there are people who love the game. They want to be involved in the game. They love the world. They want all the fun. They don't want mukti. So you see, I have given up everything and see, I have burnt myself. So of course, he's joking. And I'm out of the game, you see. But you are still in the game. So he says, do you know the game called Nax? There was a particular game which used to be played in Dakshineshwar. He says if you score more than 17 points, maybe that game, the rules are such that if you score more than 17 points, you are burnt. It is a game of cards. So Sri Ramakrishna had seen this game somewhere. He who scores less than 17 points, maybe 5, 7 or 10, is an expert player. So in this game, it's a peculiar game that you don't go out of the game. You score enough to remain in the game, but at the same time, you don't score above less than 17 points. But he is joking. He said, you people are like that. You still want the game to go on. But unfortunately, by scoring many points, I am out of the game. So he's leaving it open-ended. He's not saying this is good or that is good, but this is your condition. If you're happy, be in the game. So then he gives a wonderful example. He said, don't be hypocrites. Once I heard Keshav Sen deliver a lecture at his house. Ladies were seated behind the screen. In those days, this parda system was there, especially when, due to the influence of Islam, in most parts of India, women were not allowed to be to participate in a gathering where there are men. So there would be screens, and they could hear from behind the screen. Maybe through the slot they could even see, but they could not participate. They could not be seen by men. So they were all seated behind a screen, and Keshav Sen was praying. That was a typical Brahmo prayer. He says, "O Lord, bless us that we may dive deep and disappear altogether in the river of bhakti." These are all good songs. And Sri Ramakrishna, who was there, he smiled and then told Keshav, "Oh, if you go deep into the river of bhakti, what will be the fate of those who are seated behind the screen?" That means you are householders. If you are advising all the men to disappear in the river of bhakti, then what will happen to them? Therefore, he is joking. Do this. Dive now and then, but come up to the shore from time to time. Don't remain in the deep waters after you dive, otherwise they will all die. Hearing this, Keshav and others all burst into laughter. They understood. See, it's so ridiculous that, as Jesus said, you can't have God and mammon at the same time. You can have, just as you don't quit the game, but if you really want to realize God, you can't have both. But still, Sri Ramakrishna was very kind to them. He said, never mind. If you are sincere, you will slowly attain the Lord, even while you are living in a family life. The main problem is I and mine, the ego. Jnana is knowing, oh Lord, it is all you and yours. I am just an instrument. I don't want things to happen this way or that way. Let things happen in the normal course. It's all your wish. He said, for such people, life becomes easy. Then he gives a wonderful example which has been quoted many times. He says, live in the household like a maid servant lives in a rich man's house. You see, the wonderful example he is giving. She attends to all her jobs, all the things that she has to do. She brings up the master's children, the owners, where she is working, and calls his son her Hari. She doesn't address the son as somebody who is not her own son. He says, my Hari, my Hari. Lovingly, she does everything as if it is her son. She knows quite well that it is not her house, nor is the boy her son. But she attends to all her duties. But at the same time, inwardly, her mind is dwelling on her native village. Most of these women who worked in rich houses, they used to come from village. Poverty had made them seek such jobs. So they would be doing all the household work and they would get a salary for that, which they would send home. So even that lady had a home. That maid servant also has her own home. Maybe she does not get time to even look after her children because she has to look after. Otherwise, how can she earn money? So similarly, he says, if you can do all the duties, householders' duties, because that is required for your survival, but keep your mind fixed on the Lord. You treat everybody, even including your own family, as your own, whether it is your family, others' family. But know for certain that apart from the Lord, nobody is your own. Keep your mind fixed on the Lord. He is your own. And know that your home, your wife, son, none are yours. Just like the household maid servant does all the seva. She treats the son of the owner as her own son. She feeds him, she does all the jobs she is supposed to do. But The heart of her heart, she knows this does not belong to me. They are all his. They are all the Lord's. You are merely the servant. So this is one way, one technique he's telling Vijay Krishna Goswami. Doesn't matter if you are living in the household, you are doing your duty, you don't have leisure, you are a preacher, you are a paid preacher, so you are paid to do what you are doing. You can't simply say, I can't do it. You have to do it. There's nothing wrong, provided you don't get attached to it. I ask all of you to have mental renunciation. I don't ask you to leave home. You can attain God if you live unattached with your family and seek Him sincerely. This is a very difficult thing to do. But when Sri Ramakrishna says that, it's enough to have mental renunciation, because ultimately, in the long run, just as a maid servant knows, in the heart of her heart, she knows that the child I am serving, the master I am serving, is not my husband, is not my child, is not my mother, is not my father, but these people of the householder. I have to treat them as my child, feed them, do everything that the mother does, but without that attachment. So he says, if you live in the family or in the household, but don't have attachment to them, which is of course very difficult. Otherwise, why will people renounce? If you create bondage and then try to run away from bondage, it is possible, but it is difficult. So, Holy Mother, when she was asked many times by the mothers of young daughters who had perhaps lost their husband, in those days they used to marry them at a young age, and Nivedita was trying to educate them so that the women can stand on their own feet, they can earn a living. It was possible. Society had become modern even in those days. It had already started women's empowerment, and so Holy Mother was told many times, why don't they had an idea, an old fashioned idea, that women have to always depend on men. The idea that women is as much capable of earning her living as a Sahadharmini. In the Vedas, the tradition was that both have to work and both had the capacity to work and maintain the family. Unfortunately, this male superiority or the male domination came, most probably it's not just a biological reason, because it has been seen biologically and medically, it has been proved that women have more tenacity, they have more capacity. If you see the amount of empowerment women have, they do the household work even if they are working outside. They are expected. Certain traditional societies, that equality has not come. But the Indian or the women who are subjected to such uh, tasks, they are equal to that task. They don't mind doing it. They work like other men, but at the same time, they look after the children. They do many more things. That makes them more empowered, actually. So, the idea is that this kind of mental renunciation which Swami Sri Ramakrishna is speaking says that this servant maid, who perhaps has a family of her own, maybe her husband is not earning enough to maintain the family, she has to work so that the family gets enough money to run the household. But at the same time, she is not attached. She is doing all the duties in her uh, uh, the owner's house. She cleans the house as if she is cleaning her own house. She does everything, but and with full of love, with full of sincerity, because she is paid to do that. But at the same time, in the heart of her heart, Sri Ramakrishna says, she knows that they do not belong to her. And as soon as the job is over, or if she is dismissed, she has to leave everything and go. So similarly, he says, if you have that attitude, then there's no harm if you live in the family. Then you can seek the Lord sincerely. So then he talks about subjective and objective yoga, subjective meditation and objective meditation. It's a very important aspect of Vedanta, where to meditate you just don't have to shut your eyes. Though in the beginning we do shut our eyes. Here Sri Ramakrishna is explaining a revolutionary idea he is giving. He is telling Vijay, because he saw in the Brahmo meetings, they were all instructed that now you have to close your eyes. It was so regimental. It was so, you may say, everything followed a certain discipline. If they had announced that now you have to close your eyes, then you have to close your eyes. The standard prayers, standard opening prayers, closing prayers, and they all did that, and they had to shut. Whether they could meditate or not, that was a requirement. So he's telling Vijay that I used to meditate with my eyes shut. That's normally how people meditate, to avoid distractions. Later on, I asked myself whether the Lord is present when I shut my eyes and not present when I open them. How is it possible? He is the all-pervading, ever-existing Lord. Does he exist only when I shut my eyes? Maybe it helps me to meditate, focus on the interior of the heart where he resides, where the eternal spirit can be realized, the eternal consciousness who comes in the form of my Ishta or the Lord. But that doesn't mean he doesn't exist outside. I open my eyes and see that the Lord dwells in everything. He pervades man, he pervades the birds, bees, plants, animals. He tries to manifest in the sun, in the moon, and also in water, on dry land, in everything. So this is another idea of subjective and objective yoga. When we subjectively meditate on the Lord, we think he is within. But that Lord can be objectified. So he is not making any distinction between subjective and objective yoga. But of course, one has to start with the subjective approach, because it's not so easy to see that or to superimpose the divine consciousness on everybody. We can't do that unless we are trained, unless we have an idea of what this consciousness is, unless we have meditated within. We can't meditate on the same Lord without. We will see human beings, we will see plants, beasts, and interact with them as temporary things. We don't see the eternal Lord in them. First, we have to do that. But he does not rule out. Sri Ramakrishna does not rule out. Then he says something wonderful. He says, why do I like Shivnath? Shivnath was also a Brahmo Samaj member. Because he has meditated on the Lord for so long. He who meditates on the Lord has substance and God's power in him. And then he says, he who also sings well or plays some musical instruments, anybody who is an expert in any branch of knowledge has divine power within. So the whole idea is a person who meditates is a person who has concentration. A person who has concentration will have concentration in everything he does, whether he plays a musical instrument or is an expert in any branch of knowledge. The Gita too says this. So there's a reference where the 10th chapter of the Gita, though he has not quoted, is given a footnote that whatever you see in this world, it's there in the 10th chapter which we are discussing on Saturday, where whatever you see, Krishna tells Arjuna, he is giving him an idea of Vishwarupa Darshana, or before that, Vibhuti Yoga. In the 10th chapter is actually Vibhuti Yoga, 11th is the Vishwarupa Darshana. In Vibhuti Yoga, he says, I am giving you a small hint of my glory. It's not comprehensive. Nobody can speak of the total glory of the Lord, but I would give you a small hint. And he says, whatever you see, whatever glorious things you see in any species, any inanimate or animate object, whatever glorious you think, among the immovables, I am the Himalayas, the wonderfully. I don't bother about small hills because I see greatness in the Himalayas. Whatever is glorious, prosperous, and powerful, know that to have sprung from but a spark of my splendor. So this is echoing the Gita. Sri Krishna Sri Ramakrishna says, the Gita also says this. It's not just me who is saying. So whoever sings, in fact, Sri Ramakrishna went to Banaras once and he heard that there was a famous Veena player, one of the best in India. So instead of going to the temple, he said, no, I want to hear. I have heard he's the best. So Sri Ramakrishna always went. He went to Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar because he heard he's a great philanthropist. He helped many people. So he said, I want to see him. So Sri Ramakrishna was always trying to see that divinity. And as Gita said, he says, because he meditated on any subject or any on the Lord for so long, you get God's power. If you meditate on music, you become a musician. If you meditate on God, you become God. Devam Bhutva Devam Yajet. You worship God by becoming God. In the puja that we normally do, we invoke that divinity. We invoke various mantras. The essence of puja is we don't worship him as an ordinary pujari, as an ordinary human being. All the mantras are designed in such a way, when you do puja, that you invoke the divine presence within, and being God yourself, trying to see temporarily at least the divinity within, you worship that God. And in fact, you have to say a prayer when you finish your worship, that ignorantly, O Lord, you were within. Ignorantly, I have taken you out and worshipped you outside, but really speaking, you are deep within my heart. And please forgive me because I am used to see things outside. I'm so much attached to rituals, so much of attached to puja. And I thought that is the only worship. But there is a prayer. Even when you do ritualistic worship with so much devotion, you have to still say that, oh Lord, forgive me for bringing you out from the depth of my heart, placing you in front of me so that I can worship you easily. In fact, the worship would have been better if I could visualize you inside. But since I cannot do it, so in fact, it is we ask for forgiveness of the Lord. So also, when Sri Ramakrishna says here, the Chandi says, Chandi is a scripture like Gita, that one who is endowed with exquisite beauty has substance too. It's not just the physical beauty, any sign of excellence one has, whether he's eloquent, whether he's a good musician, whether he's a good scientist, whatever it is. He says, because of the concentration, because of the meditative nature of that person, only thing it is not directed to God, it is directed to music, directed to some other thing. But still, it's God's power which is revealed when you meditate. That is why Sri Ramakrishna says, I love Shivnath because he meditates. He does japa, he does spiritual practices. I don't love him because he is rich or he is capable. These things have come to him because he meditates on the Lord. And he says, he who meditates on the Lord has substance and power in him. So, we'll conclude now because Thakur rises now and the Brahmo devotees salute him. Thakur returns the pranam that they gave. He was so humble that he would not accept pranams. He used to do pranams in turn. And then he gets into the carriage. He is now going to Adhar's house for the darshan of the image of the goddess. Adhar's house is a famous house in Calcutta which is still there, where Adhar Sen, he was a administrative officer in the British government. So Sri Ramakrishna visited his house at least 8 times or 10 times. Other than Balram Bose's house, which he liked very much, because he believed that in Balram's house, everybody is a devotee. It's very rare to get household. He said only 1 or 2 devotees I have seen where absolutely everybody is like-minded, all are devoted. Otherwise, normally a few are devoted, like Master Mashe's house. The wife was not at all interested. So he says most of the families, he said 1 or 2, except 1 or 2, I found that people are not equally spiritual. But some houses are blessed by God so that everybody belonging to the family believes in spirituality. So he's going to Adhar Sen was one such person, and Sri Ramakrishna loved to go to their house. He would not go to any random person's house, especially as he said, he would not go to a place where there are wicked people, where there are worldly people. By wicked, I don't mean evil minded people, I mean worldly people. For him, that is wicked enough. So he used to avoid, he would not eat from them. But he loved people like Adar Sen, like Balram Bose, and he himself, even if he was not invited, he was so humble. Sometimes he'll say, Balram, it has been a long time. Please organize something and feed everybody. Because he knew Balram was large hearted. He liked to feed. That is a sign of. So he knew that if I go to some houses, they may not feed all the devotees who have come. But here is a large hearted, he is always a humble servant of the Lord. And 100 times it's a record that the only house which, other than the Dakshineshwar temple where Sri Ramakrishna is visited, most of the conversations took place there. It was Balram's house which he visited. He somehow had a wonderful opinion of this whole family. Everybody was devoted. So he said it is a very rare thing. Now he is going to Adar's house. In the next chapter, we will continue that conversation. He is going to Adar's house. From where he was, he went to Adar's house. But the next chapter is the house of Ram on Mahastami day. We'll discuss that because the recording of Adar saints, perhaps M did not go there. It takes the carriage to go there, and and M records that he is going to Adar Sen now to visit him. But unfortunately, that conversation is not here. So perhaps he did not go, so he didn't know what happened. But he has recorded the conversation on Sunday, 28th September, in Ram's house with devotee. So we'll continue in the next Sunday class. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.